So I see her the next week, that lady who recommended the book. I go up to her and I'm like, thank you so much. I read this book. I shared a little bit about what was going on with me. And she just looked at me and she said, that's great. But I just want you to know that like, it's going to take a lot more than just reading that book, that you're going to have to do like a shitload of therapy. And this is going to she said, this is your life's work, Andrea. And this is going to take years for you to work through. And I was just like, I don't have years, lady. Like I'm 28. Like I'm basically about to like shrivel up and die. So I need to have this like shit fixed like today. And the thought that I had was like, I just really hope that her childhood was a lot more fucked up than mine was.
Hi, I'm Barb Nangle. I want to welcome you to my podcast, Fragmented to Whole: Life Lessons from 12-Step Recovery, where I help people heal their emotional, psychological, and spiritual wounds and make deep, lasting changes in their lives. I'm the founder and CEO of Higher Power Coaching and Consulting, LLC, where I coach people on how to develop healthy boundaries. On this podcast, I share my experience, strength, and hope from recovery. I don't support or endorse any particular 12-step recovery fellowship, and I don't claim to speak for any particular 12-step fellowship. I also don't believe that 12-step recovery is the only way to recover. You might need additional help. My hope is that you'll find my words concretely helpful in improving your life, whether you're in recovery or not.
This is episode 160, guest episode with Andrea, Recovering Shit Show. Hi, everybody. I am super excited today to have Andrea Ashley, who is the host of the podcast Adult Child Podcast. And before I have her tell you her amazing story, I want to tell you how I found her. So I was in a step study group and somebody messaged me and said, you have to listen to this podcast. Holy shit, you're going to love it. I listened to the trailer and I was like, oh my God, this is amazing. And after listening to 2 episodes, I messaged her and I said, holy shit, I love your podcast. Would you consider being a guest on my podcast? Because first of all, she says fuck more than I do, which is unusual. Secondly, she shares raw stories of recovery like you rarely hear outside of a meeting, and sometimes you don't even hear in a meeting. She is also able to pull concepts together in a way that are really understandable. She gives amazing examples, and she's incredibly vulnerable and authentic with her own personal stories. She also has incredible guests with a wide range of expertise and style. So I am really excited and feel very privileged to have Andrea here. And I've asked her to just share her experience, strength, and hope of recovery. And then, of course, I want you to tell people like how they can find you and all that stuff. And we'll put all your contact stuff in the show notes. But take it away.
Absolutely. Well, thank you for having me. This is an honor as well. I will take any opportunity to talk about myself.
Yeah, I'm with you. Me too. I love a captive audience.
Where to begin? Lord. Yeah, so I am a recovering shit show, which means that it means that I'm sober, but I'm still a shit show from time to time, and I would have it no other way. Initially my whole branding was like former shit show, and then somebody was like, no, recovering shit show, and I was like, yes, you're right. Like former implies that I'm not ever a shit show anymore, and I mean, is life really worth living if we're never a shit show from time to time? I think not. So I guess I'll start with my adult child bottom. So I got sober at 19, in and out of rehabs for the prior 7 years. You know, I was under the impression, and I don't know if this is actually what I heard, but this is what I believed I heard in AA, was that, you know, life sucks. You get sober, and then like life is pretty damn good. Like, yes, life on life's terms still happens, but like pain of our own making ceases the day that we get sober. And so I found myself at 7 years sober, still very much with a broken man picker. You know, I think most of us come into the rooms of recovery with a broken picker. But mine did not improve. And I saw my friends who had also entered the rooms with a broken picker. I saw their pickers improve. And so I couldn't figure out what the hell was wrong with me. And it wasn't just like that the picker wasn't improving. It was more so that my reaction, how I felt, during the relationship, after the relationship. I mean, each time I felt crazier than ever. I acted crazier than ever. I felt more pain than ever. And what I had no clue at the time was that I was suffering from trauma. Like, I had no clue that every time that I was in a relationship that I was in a trauma response. And that was so freeing to learn that, right? Because I had so much shame around my behaviors and my feelings when it related to relationships. So 7 years sober, I date Brian number 1. And this guy clearly had some drinking problems that were made very clear on the first date. I had a long history of ignoring red flags, and I also had a long history of telling myself that I was not going to ignore red flags in the next relationship, and was completely incapable of doing so.
Yeah, I'm with you on that one. I could look back and I would see festivals of red flags, and I'd be like, oh, I can handle that.
Yeah, I'm like, come here.
Yeah, bring it on. I can
just
fix
what
that
I'm
shit.
looking for.
Yeah.
So this relationship ends. We dated for less than a month, and I literally felt like I was going to die. And I became a non-functioning human. I couldn't go to work. But it was in that pain that I had my first aha moment when I realized that the way that I was feeling, there was no way that this could actually be about this guy. Like, I had known him for less than a month, and he clearly had a drinking problem. And it seemed like his family did too. But I literally felt like my husband of 50 years had just like died in a plane crash, you know? And so I was like, there's no way that this could actually be about him. And that was huge. And then the even bigger awareness was that this was a feeling that I felt often as a child. You know, I started to develop separation anxiety with my mom when I was 7. And just like that panic, that feeling like literally like my life was at risk, that I wasn't going to survive if I wasn't with my mom. I realized that this was the same feeling that I felt whenever a relationship ended. And so that was huge too. So then a week or so later, a month later, I go to an AA meeting. I hear this woman share about how she too had hit a bottom at 7 years sober and came to terms with the impact that her childhood had on her and how this was showing up in her romantic relationships. So she mentioned the book, Adult Children of Alcoholics and Dysfunctional Families. I'd heard the term before. It's so funny. Like, I'd heard the term before. I definitely was a child of an alcoholic, but I don't know. I never explored it. So I went home, I read the book. My mind was blown. I couldn't put it down.
Is this the big red book that you're talking about?
Yes. Yeah.
So you say you read the book like you did it in like a night. It's 700
No, I didn't,
pages.
but I didn't.
Yeah.
But like I
just checking.
I started reading it. No, that would be really amazing. But so like the laundry list is the 12 traits of a dysfunction of an adult child. And so the one that really was like mind blowing to me, I'll read it, was number 12, which is: we are dependent personalities who are terrified of abandonment and will do anything to hold on to a relationship in order not to experience painful abandonment feelings, which we receive from living with sick people who were never there for us emotionally. And when I read that, I was like, it just hit me to my core. So I see her the next week, that lady who recommended the book. I go up to her and I'm like, thank you so much. I read this book. I shared a little bit about what was going on with me. And she just looked at me and she said, that's great. But I just want you to know that like, it's going to take a lot more than just reading that book, that you're going to have to do like a shitload of therapy. And this is going to like, she said, this is your life's work, Andrea. And this is going to take years for you to work through. And I was just like, I don't have years, lady. Like, I'm 28. Like, I'm basically about to like shrivel up and die. So I need to have this like shit fixed like today. And and the thought that I had was like, I just really hope that her childhood was a lot more fucked up than mine was. And so I was just like, okay, I'll take a year off from dating and I'll read this book and I'll be good. And that was the thing too, is that like, I would be good in between relationships. That was the other thing that was the real mind fuck for me, was that like, I was never somebody that hopped from one relationship to the next. I would have significant periods of time in between relationships where I would feel really good about myself. I felt really, really good about myself. And I would be confident that things would be different in the next relationship. And they were never freaking different because I was suffering from trauma and I didn't realize that. So I take a year off and then enter Brian number 2. And it's even worse. It's even worse. And oh God. It was the most painful 6 months of my life. But it was also like
Well,
the
that's
biggest.
saying something.
Yeah.
Growing up with trauma and being an alcoholic who was in and out of rehab from 12 to 19, and that was the worst 6 months of your life. Wow.
It's horrible. It was
Yeah.
miserable.
Yeah, that codependent pain is so fucking
There's
painful.
nothing like it.
No.
I know. It is. It's so ugh. It's horrible. But thank God for it, right? Because it was through that relationship that I realized just how serious it was, what I was dealing with. And you know, for me, I think the conclusion that I came from it is like, you know, I always knew that alcohol was a symptom, but it was through this experience that I realized that my alcoholism was a symptom. And that truly what lay at the core of that was what I believe to be is like the disease of family dysfunction and complex trauma. I wanted to read this quote too from this. So, you know, I talked about how I would go into relationships feeling good, and then immediately my peace of mind would be hijacked. And so there's this really amazing book called The Abandonment Recovery Workbook. And there's a quote in there that kind of talks about this. She goes, Peter Yelton, a friend and personal guru, says that abandonment is a profound enough trauma to implant an invisible drain deep within the self that works insidiously to siphon off self-esteem from within. The paradox for abandonment survivors is that no matter what they do to build their self-esteem, the invisible wound of abandonment is always working to drain it away.
That's beautiful. You know what strikes me about that is it talks about the soul wound in the Big Red Book, and that's a really apt description. But that description is so much more detailed than the soul. Like when you say the soul wound, people get like how fucking deep it is, but then that quote describes like what's sort of happening. Yeah,
exactly.
My personal experience is that, like, as someone who was afraid of abandonment, ironically, what I did was abandon myself. And then what happened for me was when I stopped abandoning myself, I stopped being afraid of abandonment, which makes total sense because I'm no longer abandoned, you know. But that shit is just,
it's horrible.
Ugh.
And I think the thing too is like, it's like not only do we like abandon ourselves, but like we also subconsciously are picking people we know are going to abandon us. And I think
absolutely.
That's also
and then we blame
really,
them. Right. And then we blame them for abandoning us. Yeah.
So yeah, I embarked on this healing journey, just really came to terms with truly how traumatic my childhood had been. You know, I had always known that it was not great. You know, I grew up with an alcoholic mother and a workaholic father, and you know, I was parentified at a very young age, and I became the scapegoat of my family and identified patient of my family at a very young age. But I just truly thought that since I was never physically or sexually abused, or I was never hungry, or I never went without, or I was never like not picked up from school, all of those things, like because we belonged to the country club and we went on fun vacations. And honestly, there were a lot more good times than bad times. How fucked up could it truly have been? Not to mention, like, I became the focus, like the troublemaker, the one that caused the issues at age 12.
Yeah.
But so coming to terms and like really seeing the true impact of everything that I went through, and just just like the limiting beliefs and programming that was ingrained in me in such a deep level that I didn't even know it was there. And then also the trauma component of it. Like that was mind blowing to me to realize like, oh, this is why you feel this way. And this is why you can't shut it off. And this is because I would just be so hard on myself. How could people that were going through breakups, how could they like go to work and like shut it off and like direct their focus elsewhere? Like that wasn't even a possibility for me.
Right.
And I came to see that like very much like, you know, an alcoholic is powerless over alcohol. Like when I ingest alcohol, all bets are off. When that trauma response gets going, when I get into a relationship, I'm powerless. I am powerless over the feelings that are going to come up until I kind of work through that stuff. And that's not to say that I'm never going to be triggered. I still am going to, even if I work through it, there's going to be times when like that gets triggered, but at least now I have an idea of like what the hell is going on, and I'm able to identify it in the moment, and I now have tools to work through it.
Right. Right. Yeah, me too. I have tools, which I just didn't have because I grew up in a dysfunctional family and all they did was pass the shit down. And I also identify with, I had it way better than most people. And so to be like, what's going on? I knew like when my dad tried to strangle me when I was 17, then I was 18, like I knew that was traumatic, but I was like, well, I was like almost an adult. I was almost fully formed. Like, what does that matter? But when I started to understand that one, the absence of good things happening can cause trauma. And two, the like continual, what I call like the drip, drip, drip of emotional invalidation and the gaslighting, those cause trauma. I was like, oh, that explains it. And I've heard there's one woman who I follow online, Annie Wright. I think she's a marriage and family therapist, and she calls it relational trauma.
Yeah, relational trauma.
And I think like I had never heard that other than from her. And I'm like, that explains it right there. I was traumatized in relationships. So of course, relationships
is where it shows
are
up.
the thing that brings more trauma and where my shit show comes out. Yeah. Not anymore, but used to. Yeah.
No, I mean, that was a large reason that I wanted to create the podcast, was just for all those people who are oblivious to the true impact that their upbringing had on them. And I'm not trying to like go out there and just have everyone be like, I don't know, like make up that it was so, traumatic or whatever. But like, yeah, I think that there's like a ton of people out there who don't realize that the recurring issues that they have in life is actually a result of their upbringing. And that could really run the gamut, right? Of how much that is impacting one's life. I mean, in my particular case, I feel like it was pretty severe. I mean, thankfully though, it only really became debilitating in romantic relationships. I mean, it definitely showed up in other ways. The limiting beliefs and the not, kind of like pursuing goals and dreams. And, that was the other part of it too, was like, I realized when I hit that bottom was that I hadn't really thought about what a fulfilling life would look like outside of just getting married and having kids. Like truly had been like my sole focus in life. And so that's why I'm so passionate about this recovery, is because it's about healing, but it's also about just unearthing this true self that went into hiding at such a young age in order to survive.
So what are some of the things that you've done to unearth your true self? And what are some of the healing modalities that you've used to address the trauma?
So it's just been a shitload of therapy. So I was working with a therapist for quite a while, who helped me in many ways, but this was not like her specialty. And I really didn't want to start over with somebody new. It had been advised to me a couple times. And I just was like, it's going to take so long to get them caught up in my life. You know what the real aha moment when I realized that I had to switch was when it was during the Brian #2 stuff. And I remember I was at work and I was like having a panic attack, and I was talking to my therapist and she was telling me to stop smoking cigarettes. I was like smoking. And then that I was just like, wow, you really don't get this. She was like saying that like that's like, yeah, that's negative energy. And I'm like thinking, wow, you just really don't. You just really don't get way deeper
this. Than nicotine. Yeah.
Well, yeah. Or also like, do you realize that like I'm gonna drink if I don't smoke? Like let's pick our battles here. Like I need to smoke and I need to chain smoke. Yeah. And if I was sponsoring a girl that was going through, I would say smoke away.
Yeah. Right. Yeah.
And so it was kind of this realization like, oh, you really don't get this. And so, so then I did a Google search for like adult children of alcoholic therapists. And I found, Stephanie Brown, who's actually mentioned in the Big Red Book. She's one of the pioneers of the movement. And so she has a therapy practice out here in the Bay Area. And so I called her, I left her a message. She called me back. I told her what was going on. And she connected me with my current therapist, who literally has saved my life.
That's awesome.
It's so great. Like the whole experience is just insane. Like coming out here, meeting the Bryans, finding my therapist. And she also too is like very much entwined in like me starting this podcast as well. Like it's like she I had this aha moment when I was, I was doing some like recovery coaching with this girl, like for adult child coaching. She was in detox, but she wanted to specifically talk about this stuff. But the way I got connected to this girl was to like somebody that my therapist introduced me to like 2 years prior. It's just when I look back and I reflect, and it's just the way that it all, like the stars aligned and
The
all
journey,
the connections. Yeah. It's just like,
yeah.
And so that's now I'm,
Higher
week
powered.
3 of being exactly. So now I'm week 3 of being like a full-time podcaster, and I'm trying to figure out like all of this sponsorship stuff. And it's when I start to freak out, I'm like, Andrea, look at everything that's happened. Like, there's no way it's not going to work out.
Right. Agreed.
It's interesting though. My parent, I don't talk about this on the podcast. Like my parents are really fucked up. They're really sick.
Yeah.
And so that's just been interesting too, just navigating this all. Yeah. So it's trauma informed, but I haven't done any EMDR with her since I've started. I don't think she even does that, but it's just, I saw her though for twice a week for the first year and a half. I still see her once a week. She's literally saved my life because she just knows this stuff. She's an adult child. She knows it. I feel extremely grateful that I've been able to work with her. It's not cheap. And then other than that, it's just been, like ACA meetings. Unfortunately, I haven't found a ton of good ones, but I found a few. And just like reading and growing my life spiritually. And as far as like unearthing my true self, it's just been that too. It's just been like a series of just like very weird interactions with people, and just me kind of seeing how my gift, what makes me special, is my ability to be extremely vulnerable and authentic with others, and what that brings out of them, that like that gives them space to do the same. And so it just became very clear to me that that's like my magic power.
That's wonderful. So have you tried like a whole bunch of new things just to see like, I wonder this, or I've always wanted to do that, or you've just sort of
I did stand-up comedy.
Oh, did you? I bet you were hilarious.
I talked too fast.
Oh, did you?
And I said fuck way too many times.
Oh, did
you have to like, use
possible?
It. Like you have to.
Oh, no, like on a stage, maybe. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. You have to like use them more sparingly. I did it about the great epidemic in America, which is guys lying about their height on dating apps.
Oh, I heard you saying that on one of the episodes the other day I listened to. Yeah.
Yeah. And the second time I did it in Oakland, and that was not the right crowd for that. They're like, what is this white bitch talking about? No, I just, I don't know. Just like living life. Like I'm like the type of person, I'll just like, I'll go to concerts by myself. I'll talk to anybody. Like I just, it's just been kind of, I like to talk. I like to connect with people. A lot of it's just like going to sports bars and just like meeting random people. And then after like 15 minutes, them being like, I can't believe I'm telling you this. Like I've never told this to anyone before. But what I want to say is like part of it though, is that like the whole time I felt like I was working towards something, but I had no idea what it was. And there was just so many conversations with my therapist about this, about like, I would come in and I would be frustrated because it just like was not clear to me, but I could feel it. And I would try I did. I had a bunch of ideas. I never brought anything to the finish line though.
Right. I remember you saying that you tried blogging for a while.
I wanted to blog or like make video. Like I had all these like creative endeavors, and like I would crap out and I would get really, really hard on myself. And my biggest fear, and I said this to my therapist many, many times, was that I'm never going to achieve my goals or like manifest the life that I want, not because I'm not capable, but because I'm going to always self-sabotage and let resistance get in the way. That was my greatest fear.
Yeah. Yeah. That's the abandonment, the self-abandonment. And I think like one of the things that I've learned is I think it's important to use ACA language when you're talking about symptoms of being an ACA. So instead of saying self-sabotage, if you refer to it as abandonment, you're reminding yourself, oh, that's right, I'm doing this because I'm an adult child. And the reason that is important is because there's a solution to that. Whereas if you're just sort of self-sabotaging, you're like, what the fuck is this about? I don't know, what the answer is to that. But there's a solution to the self-abandonment. you know?
Mm-hmm. It's hard.
Yeah.
It's hard, and it hasn't been easy or comfortable. The whole, it's been really uncomfortable, but
Yeah. How is your life now compared to how many years ago did you hit your
4
adult
years
child
ago.
bottom? 4 years ago? Okay. How is your life now?
Well, it's been interesting with the pandemic. I would say that my sense of self, the relationship that I have with myself, the sense of ease that I have with myself, I mean, that has just it's night and day. There's still areas of my life that I feel a lack of fulfillment in. I feel like a lot of my friends have moved away from here, and I'm wanting to leave San Francisco as well. It's been really interesting because I feel like prior to starting this and just the past few years, just having this like deep longing for deep connection with
Mm.
others. It's been really amazing to see the relationships that I've established with people like through the pot. Unfortunately, like a lot of them don't live here. What do I not like about my life right now is like I really wish I saw more people like face to face.
Mm.
I spend like way too
Yeah.
much time with myself. But the
Yeah.
fact that I'm able to do it and I'm like actually in the headspace that I'm in like shows quite a whole hell of a lot. As far as like
Yeah.
relationships and dating go, I took a long break and I've dated on and off the past few years. I haven't really been in a relationship since I hit that bottom. I can tell you that it is so much better. Like I've noticed such a huge difference in one, who I'm attracted to, and two,
Mm.
how I react in a relationship. But this is what I know. There's still more work to be done. Like I've done all this work single. I can't expect that like when I start dating again that it's going to be easy breezy. It's not. And I had a little bout of that recently. And my therapist was just like, this is more unresolved business. And I said, business is
Mm-hmm.
closed. I'm done resolving
Yeah.
business.
Well, I will say, so I was much older than you when I got into recovery. And so I was 55 when I met
Mhm.
my sweetheart. He's also in recovery. It was pretty damn easy compared to every other relationship. It was super fucking easy. But it's almost like, oh, I just realized it's almost like doing like a 10th step every night. We literally nip shit in the bud just as it, like anything. It just, there's
Mhm.
literally nothing between he and I. And one of the things that attracted me the most to him when I met him was that he had super good boundaries and could take care of himself. He has a chronic illness. And that has been an important part of our relationship because I'm really clear it's not happening to me. It's
Mhm.
not up to me to rescue him. And he has told me, you have no idea how much relief that gives me. I get to be ill and not worry about how it's impacting you.
Mm.
And it's like, who would think somebody's chronic illness would be a gift in a relationship, you know? But and it's also been a gift because in addition to his recovery, being on the brink of death 3 fucking times and being hospitalized for over 100 days twice gives someone quite a perspective on life. So he's like, you know what matters? Love and human
Mhm.
relationships. That's what
Mhm.
fucking matters in life. So all the other shit is just the small stuff, you know. But,
So are you telling me I
you
should
know,
go find somebody on their deathbed?
no, no. No, not at all. But I think that it's possible that it can be easy if you're in the right place and the person is in the right place. You know, I think that it is possible. So don't assume that it's going to be really fucking difficult. And I think, you know, you have a whole like tool shed now, clearly, not just a toolbox or a toolkit, you know, to
Yeah,
bring
but
to a
I guess what I mean
relationship.
is that it's going to take work. You know what I mean? It's
Yeah, of
yeah.
course. Yeah, it
Yeah.
definitely takes work every day, but you're making decisions of this is a priority for me. Like my relationship is a
Mhm.
priority. I
Mhm.
don't put other shit in front of it. Well, I mean, I do. God, my recovery, you know, that kind of stuff, but it's really important to me and I give time to my relationship. So, but we got to start winding down. I would like for you to share with everybody. I will also put all the stuff in the show notes, but where can people find you? Where's your favorite places to hang out?
My apartment with my
How
cat.
about
Yeah.
online?
So you can find my podcast anywhere, Adult Child. And I am on Instagram and TikTok at Adult Child Pod, POD. And then you can email me at andrea@adultchildpodcast.com. I love to hear from people, so please reach out. I also have my Patreon group, patreon.com/adultchild. That's where I host 2 weekly peer support groups, which are amazing.
Oh, nice.
They're on Thursdays and Sundays. It's like an amazing group of people. I was a little bit nervous about who the hell would join. Like, am I going to get some like kooks? Everyone's lovely, and everyone is willing to and is doing the work to heal and recover. And it's just,
oh, that's great.
It's hard because it's like, for me, it was, even my friends that I had in sobriety, like, I just felt like they didn't struggle with this stuff in the way that I did. And I just felt so judged. And so it's just a really amazing place to just be like, yeah, we get it. Like, I get you're crazy. No, thank you so much. This is such a pleasure.
Oh, yeah. Is there anything that you wanted to share that you didn't get to share? Anything else you want to end with? Yeah.
If you're going through it right now, what I always like to say is, like, through great pain comes great change. And there isn't like a single difficult experience that I've had in my past that I don't regret. Like, I wouldn't change any of it. Like, every single moment of pain in my past, I'm so grateful for, and it serves such a large and great purpose in my life and in the lives of a lot of other people as well. So,
yeah, agreed. I remember when I got into recovery, I would hear people saying that they were grateful, recovering, whatever. And I was like, okay, I get that you're grateful that you're like not using anymore or whatever. But to be grateful that you actually got into like had the whatever addiction or dysfunctional family or whatever, I was like, no, but now I'm actually there, because I think about it like this, like, let's say somebody grew up in a family that was normal. I don't know what that is, but they were like happy, joyous, and free. And then you compare that to somebody who grew up in a fucked up family, and then they went into recovery and they became happy, joyous, and free. Who's going to value happy, joyous, and free more? Person number 2, like way the fuck more. Like, one of the things I was talking about with a sponsee is that we have a freedom that we know is freedom. Whereas people who didn't have this freedom don't know they have no idea. Like, that making choices is freeing. Like, I can choose who I'm going to be in a relationship with. I'm not compelled. I can choose, my behavior and all that kind of stuff. So yeah.
True dat.
I'm in with the recovery. Yeah. All right. Well, that seems like a good note on which to end. Thank you again, and keep up the great work. I absolutely fucking love your podcast, and I share it with everybody. And I tell them, you got to listen to this. So
yeah, you hear that? Go listen to it.
Go listen to it. And I'll have links to it, of course, in the show notes.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you so much, Andrea.
I was recently reminded by a friend that when I first started recovery, I didn't feel lovable. I almost can't believe that I used to feel that way, and that I kind of forgot something so profound, because I truly love myself now. And I want that for everybody. If you don't love yourself, there's literally nothing that can make up for that. I created something exclusively for my private clients, since many of them don't love themselves. And I've now opened up my private vault to share it with up to 10 people individually. It's called the Self-Love Sprint. You'll grow to love yourself and truly feel worthy, so you can stop saying yes when you really want to say no, stop neglecting yourself and putting everyone else first. Stop saying all kinds of nasty shit to yourself. That is not what people who love themselves and feel deserving do. You'll stop being afraid that others will think that you're selfish for taking time to care for yourself. This is also for you if you don't really know who you are, because you've always been such a fucking chameleon. Go to higherpowercc.com/love sprint. Remember, I'm only offering 10 of these, so don't wait. If you like this podcast, and I'm guessing you did or you wouldn't still be listening, then you're gonna love the other things I have to offer. If you'd love pre-release podcast scripts and episodes before anyone else gets them, or if you'd love access to content from my private vault that I developed exclusively for my private clients, which is like having a work session with me without me actually being there, go to patreon.com/higherpowercoaching. There are 3 tiers ranging from as low as $4 up to $24 a month. You'll also love my weekly newsletter, Friday Fragments, which has content very similar to the podcast. You can check it out at fridayfragments.news. That's fridayfragments.news. Please like and subscribe to my podcast on your favorite podcast outlet. I'd also love it if you'd leave a review, which you can do either in the show notes or on Apple Podcasts. It really helps other people find my podcast so they can get the benefits you've gotten from listening. If someone came to mind when you listened to this particular episode, please share it with them. And my favorite place to hang out on social media is Instagram. I'm at Higher Power Coaching. Please DM me there. I'd love to hear what you got from this episode. I run group and private coaching programs on building healthy boundaries. Whether you need help with boundaries in your personal, professional, or romantic life, I can help. Head on over to barbchat.net, where you can hop onto my calendar for a free 30-minute Better Boundaries consultation. My ideal client is someone who is ripe for change. If that's you, I would love to work with you. My goal with all my work is to help you make lasting changes in your life like I've made deep, lasting changes in my life. Remember, it's never too late to recover. No one is beyond hope, and healing is possible. Thanks for listening.